Rashid Al-Mansoor was celebrated as Dubai's most charming businessman until the investigation into his wife, Lina Kareem, revealed the darkest secret he spent years hiding. 2. Lina Kareem survived the crash that should have ended her life. But 5 years later, investigators uncovered the name behind the tragedy: her own husband, Rashid Al-Mansoor. 3. When Farah Dawood began questioning the accident that disabled her friend Lina Kareem, she uncovered a trail that led straight back to the man everyone admired: Rashid Al-Mansoor. Patitik Omar Belkhani never expected a cold case to expose one of Dubai's wealthiest figures, but his investigation into Lina Kareem's accident pointed to only one name: Rashid Al-Mansoor. 5. Rashid Al-Mansoor pretended to be the perfect husband, but Lina Kareem's so-called accident and the secrets, revealed 5 years later, exposed the darkest truth imaginable. Rashid Al-Mansoor lived in a world built on wealth, power, and the admiration of others. From the outside, his life looked flawless. He owned a chain of luxury real estate developments, collected rare cars, and attended elite gatherings where everyone praised his success. People saw him as a charming figure who rose from an ordinary background to extraordinary heights. His story inspired many, and he enjoyed every bit of attention it brought. What the public never saw was the darker side that lived beneath his polished image, a part of him shaped by greed and an unrelenting hunger for control. His wife, Lina Kareem, was the complete opposite. She was thoughtful, soft-spoken, and devoted to their marriage. She admired Rashid's determination and believed their relationship was built on trust. Lina worked as a graphic designer and found joy in simple things: quiet mornings, art books, and long drives across the city. When she first met Rashid, she thought she had found someone who valued those moments as much as she did. For years, she remained unaware that Rashid's affection had begun to fade. As soon as he realized, she would not blindly support every business move he made. The real conflict started when Rashid entered a high-risk investment deal that promised quick returns. The opportunity appeared to be the breakthrough that would put him among Dubai's most influential entrepreneurs. But there was a serious problem. Half of his assets were tied to Lina's name, the result of a decision they made early in marriage to keep their finances balanced and safe. Under normal circumstances, Lina would have willingly supported him, but this deal was too unstable. She refused to sign the documents required for Rashid to access certain funds, explaining her concerns in hopes of protecting their future. Rashid did not see her refusal as love or caution. He saw it as betrayal. He began to feel humiliated, convinced that Lina was standing in his way intentionally. He believed he deserved more power, more freedom, more recognition. Every time he looked at her, he saw a wall he needed to break through. That was when the idea first formed in his mind: quiet and poisonous. If she was no longer part of the picture, everything would be his. Over the next few weeks, Rashid started reshaping his behavior to maintain the illusion of a caring husband. He went out of his way to appear supportive and generous, giving Lina no reason to be suspicious. Meanwhile, he spent long nights planning a situation that would look natural, tragic, and completely unconnected to him. Lina had a habit of driving home alone after her weekend gatherings with friends. Rashid paid close attention to her routes, her timing, and the places where traffic was thin enough for an incident to look accidental. On the night everything changed, Lina followed her usual path home. The streets were quiet, and the air felt calm. She had no idea that a vehicle had been monitoring her movements from a distance. Rashid had already arranged for the road to be cleared at a specific time. When Lina reached the isolated stretch of highway, her car suddenly lost control, spinning violently before crashing into the side rail. The impact left her severely injured, and although she survived, her body would never recover fully. The doctors described her condition as permanent, leaving her unable to live as she once did. Rashid arrived at the hospital acting devastated. He held himself like a grieving husband whose world had collapsed. People around him expressed sympathy, believing he was suffering deeply. Inside, however, Rashid felt a sense of victory. He understood that Lina's new condition would give him the leverage he needed. It didn't take long before he filed for divorce, using her disability as the reason he could no longer maintain the marriage. While she struggled to adapt to her new life, Rashid walked away with nearly everything they once shared. He told everyone he had done everything he could. In truth, he had done exactly what he planned: a crime crafted with patience, a betrayal hidden behind a flawless smile. Rashid believed the past was buried forever. He had no idea that the night he staged so carefully would return to destroy him years later. Farah Dawood watched Lina struggle through her long recovery, and every day her concern grew stronger. She had known Lina for years, long before the wealth and the elegant lifestyle. Farah understood Lina's habits, fears, strengths, and patterns better than anyone. The official explanation of the crash never sat right with her. The reports described it as a simple loss of control, but Farah felt a quiet disturbance inside her every time she looked at the documents. The details seemed clean, too convenient, and strangely incomplete. It was as if someone had wiped the parts that mattered most. Lina, still trying to adjust to her new reality, did not want to dwell on the accident. She pushed herself to focus on healing and rebuilding small routines. Even so, Farah noticed moments. when Lina looked distant, as if haunted by something she couldn't fully remember. The trauma had blurred much of that night, leaving her with fragments that made little sense. Farah gently tried to ask questions, but Lina would always lower her eyes and change the subject. She was exhausted by pain, both physical and emotional, and the divorce had drained whatever strength she had left. Still, Farah could not shake the feeling that something darker was hidden behind the tragedy. She started reviewing the police report on her own, reading every word with slow concentration. The speed calculations didn't match Lina's usual driving habits. The weather conditions were calm, the road nearly empty, and yet there were no skid marks from Lina trying to regain control. The absence of those marks suggested the car had malfunctioned or been forced into the crash. This inconsistency echoed in Farah's mind like a quiet alarm. Meanwhile, Rashid's public life flourished. He appeared in magazines, at business events, and on social platforms showcasing new investments. To outsiders, it seemed like he had managed to survive a heartbreaking time by throwing himself into work. Farah, however, noticed something different. Rashid looked less burdened and more confident than ever. His rise seemed strangely aligned with the timeline of Lina's accident and their divorce. It felt unnatural, as though he had stepped out of a tragedy not with sorrow but with a renewed sense of freedom. The next clue arrived unexpectedly. Farah visited the location of the crash to understand the environment better. She walked along the stretch of highway, scanning the damaged rails and surrounding area. A local worker who maintained the roadside barriers mentioned that he found something odd days after the accident: small pieces of broken plastic that didn't match Lina's car. He had turned them over to his supervisor, but they were never referenced in any official report. Farah stored this information in her mind like a piece of a puzzle she wasn't yet able to solve. During these months of quiet investigation, Farah kept her concerns hidden from Lina. She didn't want to cause her distress without proof. But the more she uncovered, the more she sensed a deliberate cover-up. She collected everything she found: accident photos, road maintenance logs, inconsistencies in financial records, and irregularities in Rashid's timeline. Her notebook grew heavier with each passing week. After nearly 3 years of searching alone, Farah realized she needed help. The information she gathered was meaningful, but she lacked the expertise to interpret it fully. She began researching private investigators who specialized in overlooked or suspicious cases. One name appeared repeatedly: Omar Belkhani, known for solving cases that others had abandoned. He had a reputation for seeing patterns where others saw chaos, and his work was respected even among officials who disliked him. Farah gathered all her documents and reached out to Omar with caution. She presented a timeline, evidence, and her own observations, hoping he would see what she saw. Omar took his time reviewing the material. Farah watched his expression, searching for any sign of agreement or doubt. After a long silence, Omar confirmed what she had feared all along. The accident did not look accidental at all. From that moment, the search for truth became more than curiosity. It became a mission fueled by the quiet determination of two people who refused to let a buried crime stay hidden. Farah didn't know where the path would lead, but she finally felt that Lina had someone fighting for her behind the scenes. The first real step toward unraveling Rashid's secret had been taken. Omar Belkhani approached the case with the calm precision of someone who had spent years studying human deception. He started by mapping out Rashid Al-Mansoor's business activity around the time of Lina's accident and the divorce that followed. The financial patterns revealed a story very different from the one Rashid presented to the world. 5 years earlier, Rashid had been close to losing a major investment, facing debts that could have destroyed his reputation overnight. Yet within months of Lina's crash and the dissolution of their marriage, his financial situation shifted dramatically. New accounts appeared, old debts vanished, and several large transactions flowed smoothly through channels no one had questioned before. Omar dug deeper. He noticed that one of Rashid's companies received a sudden influx of capital shortly after the divorce settlement. The timing was too precise to be chance. This discovery pushed Omar to investigate where the money originated. Through financial trails and archived bank statements, he uncovered hidden transfers linked to a private lender whose name had surfaced in other questionable deals. Although the lender had no direct public connection to Rashid, multiple past transactions hinted at a long, secret relationship between them. As Omar followed these leads, a new name entered the picture: Youssef Rami, Rashid's long-standing business rival. Years earlier, Youssef had tried to expose Rashid for fraudulent activity but lacked the evidence to prove anything. Omar found old documents showing that Youssef once received an anonymous message hinting that Rashid had engineered an incident involving his wife to gain full control of their wealth. At the time, Youssef dismissed it as an attempt to manipulate him, and the message had vanished before he could investigate further. Curiosity led Omar to seek out Youssef. The meeting was tense at first, as Youssef had no reason to trust anyone connected to Rashid's name. But once Omar explained his purpose, Youssef brought out a set of files he had kept hidden for years. Among them was something unexpected: surveillance footage from a private security drone that belonged to a property Youssef once managed near the highway where Lina crashed. The drone captured a portion of the road that night, recording a dark luxury vehicle traveling behind Lina's car just minutes before the accident. Although the footage was blurry, Omar recognized a specific detail in the vehicle's shape. He compared it to earlier images of Rashid's car collection and found a match. A rare model Rashid owned at the time but sold shortly after the incident. The sale record confirmed the timing just weeks after the crash, suggesting Rashid had been eager to get rid of something. This discovery opened a new path. Omar began investigating the car itself. He tracked down the mechanic who serviced Rashid's vehicles during that period. The mechanic remembered the model well because it arrived one morning with significant front-end marks, as though it had struck something heavy. Rashid had paid extra for immediate repairs and insisted no record be kept. The mechanic didn't question it then, but the memory stayed with him. Omar pieced these elements together like fragments of a dangerous puzzle. The financial inconsistencies suggested motive. The blurred surveillance footage suggested opportunity. The damaged vehicle suggested involvement. Each clue pointed in the same direction, forming a sequence that made the accident look increasingly deliberate. Still, the case was far from complete. There were gaps in the evidence, and Rashid's influence made every step risky. Omar knew he needed more than suspicion. He needed a pattern clear enough to withstand scrutiny. As he continued his investigation, he found signs of fear in Rashid's recent behavior. Anonymous warnings had been sent to Rashid months earlier, something Omar had quietly initiated by sharing hints with an independent monitoring group. Rashid, thinking someone from his inner circle had betrayed him, began distancing himself from certain partners and silently restructuring his companies. The first crack in Rashid's empire had appeared. It was subtle, but powerful. Omar sensed that Rashid was beginning to realize that the past he buried might not stay hidden forever, and once a man like Rashid felt pressure, the truth usually wasn't far behind. The discoveries surrounding Rashid Al-Mansoor began building into something he could no longer outrun. Omar Belkhani continued assembling every fragment he had gathered, and as he did, the shape of the truth became clearer. The pattern behind Rashid's actions expanded far beyond a single incident. It stretched into years of manipulation, financial engineering, and strategic destruction of anything that blocked his path. This growing picture made the events of Lina's accident feel less like a tragic moment, and more like the final move in a carefully planned scheme. But what Omar needed was the last missing link, proof that Rashid's vehicle had been directly involved in the crash. That link arrived unexpectedly. A retired mechanic named Nasser dropped a message to Omar claiming he once worked on luxury vehicles for several wealthy clients, including Rashid. When Omar met him, Nasser recounted something he had kept to himself for years. One early morning after Lina's accident, Rashid brought in a car with damage on the front bumper and left fender. The marks looked like the vehicle had struck something at high speed. Rashid insisted the repairs be done immediately and paid large sums for silence. At the time, Nasser suspected it was related to an unreported incident, but he never imagined it might connect to a crime. His memory, though old, was vivid enough to add another solid piece to the growing chain of evidence. Meanwhile, Farah continued supporting the investigation quietly. She handed over her files to Omar, every note, every photograph, every inconsistency she had documented. Her records filled in the spaces between the surveillance footage, the faulty police report, and the timeline surrounding Rashid's sudden rise in wealth. Each detail strengthened the foundation of what Omar was building. Through Farah's materials, Omar found additional hints that someone inside the investigation unit may have been influenced to overlook certain details. It seemed the original report had been shaped to protect Rashid rather than uncover the truth. The more evidence accumulated, the heavier the case became. Omar realized they were reaching a point where the truth could no longer be dismissed as chance. But he also knew that exposing a man as powerful as Rashid required absolute precision. Rashid's influence stretched through business networks, social circles, and even a few positions inside local institutions. Any wrong step could alert him too early. Omar's strategy centered on patience, allowing Rashid to feel safe long enough for the investigation to catch up to him. During this time, Rashid began noticing changes around him. His advisors avoided him. Two of his longtime business partners suddenly initiated audits of their shared ventures, something they had never done before. A few investors pulled out of deals without explanation. These unusual movements unsettled him, and he sensed something was shifting in the shadows. Rumors about misconduct started circulating quietly. Even though Rashid worked hard to maintain his flawless public image, he could feel control slipping from his hands. The situation worsened when financial regulators started reviewing several of his companies. What began as routine inspections quickly expanded into full inquiries. They found inconsistencies that were ignored for years but now stood out under close scrutiny. Funds routed through offshore accounts, suspicious loan approvals, and unexplained cash deposits became part of a widening investigation. Rashid felt cornered for the first time in his life. In the midst of these unraveling events, Omar submitted his compiled findings to the authorities. The surveillance footage, the mechanic's testimony, the financial trail, and Faraz's collection of overlooked details created a powerful argument that Lina's accident had not been a random tragedy. Officials opened a formal case. marking the first time Rashid's name appeared in an investigation that he could not easily dismiss or control. Lina, who had spent years trying to rebuild herself emotionally and physically, received a notice informing her that her accident was under renewed examination. The news left her shaken, yet something inside her felt strengthened. She allowed investigators to examine all her past medical records, phone logs, and financial history. For the first time since the crash, Lina sensed that the truth she had been too afraid to search for might finally come into the light. Rashid's carefully curated world began collapsing from all sides. He spent his days pacing through empty halls, reviewing documents, and questioning everyone around him. Each attempt to regain control failed. The secret he thought he buried 5 years ago had finally clawed its way back to the surface, and the walls around him were closing in with unstoppable force. Rashid Al-Mansoor spent years believing that the past was behind him, locked away in silence. But as soon as the investigation reopened, the life he had built on deception began to shift beneath his feet. He tried to continue his daily routines, business meetings, social appearances, luxury events, but an invisible pressure followed him everywhere. His mind replayed the accident he once staged so confidently, and the certainty he once felt began to crack. Every phone call startled him. Every unfamiliar car on the street made him uneasy. The empire he built on ambition and manipulation was now trembling under the weight of truth. Authorities moved quietly but steadily. They gathered statements from the mechanic, the investigators who handled the original report, and employees who noticed inconsistencies in Rashid's instructions during the days surrounding the accident. His past financial transactions were reviewed line by line, exposing patterns that pointed directly to hidden motives. Rashid attempted to hire top lawyers and financial consultants, but many refused to work with him after learning he was being investigated for attempted murder. The whispers around the city turned into conversations, and soon his business reputation was damaged beyond repair. Lina observed the development from a distance. She didn't feel triumph or revenge, only a slow, heavy acceptance. The truth was painful, but it finally gave her the clarity she needed. She had spent years believing she had failed somehow, thinking the accident was her fault or that she had done something to drive Rashid away. Learning what really happened did not erase her suffering, but it pulled away the fog that had covered her life since the crash. She felt supported in ways she hadn't expected, especially from Farah, who stayed by her through every difficult moment. As the investigation progressed, Rashid's behavior became increasingly erratic. He tried to reach out to former partners, hoping to secure help or leverage old alliances, but none wanted to be connected to him. Some feared legal consequences, others felt betrayed by past deals that now appeared suspicious. Rashid's influence, once a powerful force in Dubai's business world, dissolved rapidly. Even the people he trusted the most kept their distance. The turning point arrived when the compiled evidence, financial, mechanical, digital, and testimonial, was presented to the court. The case against Rashid was no longer speculation or fragmented theories. It was a clear, connected chain showing motive, method, and execution. The repaired car, the surveillance footage, the abrupt rise in wealth, and the altered accident report created a picture that no defense could easily dismantle. Rashid's strategy of denial collapsed as investigators confronted him with facts he couldn't explain. His arrest was swift and quiet. There was no dramatic scene, no public breakdown. He surrendered to authorities with a blank expression, as though he had already accepted his fate. But inside, he felt a storm of panic and disbelief. He had always believed he was too smart, too careful, and too untouchable to ever be caught. The realization that the plan he once considered perfect had fallen apart left him hollow. The trial drew significant public attention. People who once admired Rashid watched the details unfold with shock. The story of how he staged his wife's accident for financial gain became a chilling example of how ambition can twist a person beyond recognition. Prosecutors presented every piece of evidence with methodical precision, revealing the cold strategy behind his actions. The court found him guilty on multiple charges, including attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Rashid received a long prison sentence, marked by the gravity of his crimes and the impact they had on Lina's life. For Lina, the verdict brought a sense of closure. She knew no punishment could restore what she had lost: her mobility, her peace, her trust. But the truth finally had a voice. She could move forward without the weight of uncertainty. Farah stayed beside her, helping her rebuild a future shaped not by fear but by resilience. Omar continued his investigative work, but this case remained with him as one of the most meaningful victories of his career. Rashid spent his days behind bars replaying the choices that led him there. The power he once held vanished entirely. The silence of the prison cell was a constant reminder of the life he had destroyed, not just Lina's, but his own. 5 years after orchestrating a crime he believed would secure his success, the truth overturned everything he valued. The story spread throughout the city, serving as a warning that no secret stays buried forever. Justice may take time, but it moves with a force that cannot be avoided. And in the end, the truth that Rashid tried so desperately to escape returned with unmistakable clarity, bringing his entire world crashing down.